I asked Stephen Booth, Research Director at the think tank Open Europe, which favours reform in the EU, what he learned from the Chancellor today.
She clearly focused on the need for economic competitiveness in Europe. While it can never live up to the hype that it attracted in the run-up to the speech, I think Merkel was quite clear that she felt that Europe needed to change in order to compete globally and also to regain the trust of people across Europe. In that sense, I think it's encouraging to David Cameron because at least she indicated openness to change. And until she hears more specifics from David Cameron, we couldn't really expect her to say much more.
I suppose time will tell a little bit, but where she said very early on in her speech that those of you who hope that I'm going to come and help pave the way for fundamental reform of the European architecture, you're going to be disappointed. That's not just a nice way of avoiding the issue for now, is it? It's more than that. That sort of broader-based support for Britain is just not on the table.
I think it depends what Britain really asks for. We still don't really know what David Cameron is preparing to ask for. He has himself moved away from the initial rhetoric when he first came to office about much more kind of unilateral opt-outs and that kind of thing. And the rhetoric about that has changed. David Cameron has been very keen to stress that this is about making Europe as a whole more competitive. This is reform across the European Union to make it more democratically accountable for everyone across the EU. And I think that is in response to German concerns, but also concerns from across Europe. It's clear that if Cameron or if Britain, any British Prime Minister wants to make change in Europe, it has to be something that everyone feels they can sign up to. And I think that is reflected not only in Merkel's remarks, but also in the sort of change in tack that David Cameron has taken as well over the previous year.
I suppose we can look at that change of tack as one area, particularly with regard to Germany, but the sort of bigger historical picture, I suppose, is that probably most people in Britain consider Germans to be the front runners in greater European integration and moving further towards a federal Europe. The poll which New Open Europe and YouGov have brought out does point, doesn't it, to some of the more practical, specific ways in which Germans and British actually see eye to eye on many aspects of Europe.
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, I think there's no doubt that there's definitely a difference in culture in Germany and Britain in their attitudes to Europe. Germany is much more bound up in the European project in a sense. But when it comes down to the practical details, when you test specific policy areas, there's a great deal of overlap in both countries about a desire to see more policies decided nationally rather than at the European level. And for the EU to do some things, but do them better and actually not interfere in all manners of national life, which they feel aren't actually necessarily needed at the European level.
Were there any particular areas that struck you as surprising?
Well, in our poll, we tested 6 areas, and 4 of them, which were EU migrants' access to benefits, police and criminal justice law, employment law, and regional development subsidies. In both Britain and Germany, people felt those areas should be decided nationally rather than at the EU level. So there's obviously a degree of overlap there. And also, in both countries, feeling that national parliaments should have a much greater role in being able to block EU laws. And that's something that does fit in with David Cameron's reform agenda, but also the Dutch government has pushed forward this idea of having a red card for national parliaments, which would allow them to block proposals from the European Commission that they felt should either be decided nationally or just weren't in the interests of the member states.
Stephen Booth of Open Europe.